Hi everyone, and welcome to our third meeting of the Community Spaces Network of 2026. Can't believe that we're in June already. That seems to have flown by very quickly. But yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed the nice weather we had recently, and hope everyone is coping with the rubbish weather we're having now, and hopefully it comes back at some point. I'll just introduce myself. So I'm Aimee and I'm the membership officer at Social Enterprise Scotland. Joining me is Nikki from Scottish Rural Action, who helps to, and we both co-facilitate this network. It would be great if we could kind of get a sense of who's in the room. So Nikki mentioned if you can put in the chat who you are, what organisation you represent and where you're coming from today, then that would help to just get a kind of overall picture of who's in the room. I'll just give a little bit of background quickly on the Community Spaces Network. So we established this network because the social enterprise census consistently shows that community spaces are one of the most active social enterprise areas, and a large number of our members run vibrant and thriving community spaces. So establishing this network was something that was quite close to our hearts and was something that kept being brought up in meetings that we were having. There's been an appetite for a network for quite a while, especially one that was a little bit more focused on community space practitioners, which is what this is. As a result, we set up the network in partnership with SRA in order to establish topics of interest, hear from key speakers, create opportunities for connection and collaboration. We meet 3 or 4 times per year with different themes, speakers, and a time for networking as well. So it's just a really nice way to make sure that like-minded people are all in the same room and learning from each other and fostering that environment of collaboration rather than competition. And I think we've been running for a little while now, and I think that it is fulfilling that purpose, which is great. I'll just hand over to Nikki just now to explain kind of the purpose of this session and highlight some of our speakers. So yeah, I'll just hand over to Nikki now. That's okay.
So I was busy liking the comments in the chat. So Aimee, you can continue that task. So hi everyone, and welcome today. I'm Nikki from Scottish Rural Action, and actually really excited about this session today. As I mentioned before, I live in Tinneburg, which is a fairly small community, but we have an extensive network of remote workers here, and also many village halls and community spaces. And yet we do not have a co-working space. And yet there's definitely appetite to set one up here, and I think it would be well used. Obviously, I don't need to kind of tell you about the kind of the health and well-being, well, the kind of the mental health and well-being benefits, I suppose, of getting out of your home. I mean, I work, Monday to Friday from home, and I'd love if there was somewhere else that I could go. So I'm really excited to learn more from Helen and Hannah, who are our 2 speakers today. Diane from Strathdurn was supposed to be speaking as well, but unfortunately can't make it due to internet issues. So we're going to be hearing from Helen, first of all, who is co-founder of Connected Hub Scotland. So we'll be learning a bit more about the work that's going on there, and of course the very well-established Melting Pot in Edinburgh. And then we'll hear from Hannah, who runs the pop shop in Dunoon, which is fairly local-ish to me. And yeah, just be really interested to hear about, some of the practical steps that could be taken for perhaps more rural communities to get something like this set up. So yeah, so without further ado, I shall pass over to Helen. If you'd like to unmute yourself, Helen.
I will. Thanks very much, Nikki.
Sorry, I should also say, sorry, just very quickly. What we'll do is we'll have Helen will speak first, and then Hannah, and then there'll be plenty of time at the end for Q&A to ask questions of the speakers, and also for a bit more of an open discussion. Right, I'll shut up now. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thanks, Nikki. And nice to see, I can't see everyone because it's on 2 screens, but nice to see lots of you and see so many people interested in this. And thanks to Nikki and Aimee for asking us to come along and talk. I am going to share some slides. I can't multitask, so bear with me. Okay, hopefully you can see all them. So I guess just for context, I'm going to give a bit more of the big picture, and then Hannah will give you, I guess, more of that localized context as one of the hubs within the Connected Hubs network. So just to tell you a little bit more, first of all, for those who don't know the Melting Pot, the Melting Pot is Scotland's Centre for Social Innovation, and we were one of the first co-working communities in Europe. It's located in Edinburgh. It is wet here as well, but we are not rural. And we've been around since 2007. And I guess over that time, we've supported sort of thousands of people who are working to create positive change for the world through social enterprise, charity, B Corps, individuals working in that space. And we do that in a few different ways. So we provide a collaborative hub for people to come together, connect and collaborate. And we offer events, an incubator and a consultancy arm to help people turn those ideas into action and build sustainable enterprises. And I guess at the very heart of it, what we do is really about that kind of networking piece, building community and facilitating that connection. So we act very much as a facilitator and a convener. And my role as the chief exec is obviously just looking after that space and the other arms of the business, as well as kind of thinking more strategically around how we can support and connect others to grow that social innovation community in Scotland. Got to multitask, which I can't do. I've already jumped on and done this slide, but there's lots of things in there that we do. As I've mentioned, we've got that kind of incubator piece. We do events. So one of our events that we've run across Scotland, for example, is called Bridging Communities. Pretty much does what it says on the tin. We bring people together from different sectors, from public, academic, private, and the third sector, to get them all in the same space and learn from each other and create kind of opportunities to connect and collaborate. And the thing that we did most recently, which is obviously what we're going to talk about more today, is that we launched with a few of the partners, Connected Hubs Scotland, and we saw a bit of a need for that through the work that was being done in Ireland, but also through our own experience and people reaching out to us over the years to ask, you know, how do we create something similar to the Melting Pot in our own community, in our own spaces? I think Hannah actually back in the day had some advice and support from the Melting Pot team prior to my long time ago, I think. But it was around how can we actually facilitate a space for that shared learning. But most importantly, I think as well, is to keep it grassroots and embedded in the communities, as opposed to us going in and saying, this is how you do it. Because what works in Edinburgh won't necessarily work in a tiny village or up on an island. So it's different. So it's around how do we just connect and support and share some learning, but also enable all the different hubs in the network to learn from each other. So that's kind of really core to our approach, is that collaborative piece. And I'm multitasking again, connecting people. So the other hubs that were helped set up Connected Hubs just over a year ago was Dunkeld and Burnham Community Co-working, Impact Hub up in Inverness, ourselves, and the Glasgow Collective. And I guess the key kind of driver for that was we really recognise that, I guess, the world of work is changing, which you will all know. There'll be lots of people working remotely, flexibly, or hybridly, or running their own enterprises. And so there was a real sort of need for more spaces and access to space for people, but also the Irish model, which is where they've been really helpful. Actually, the team over in Ireland, they've really demonstrated the impact a network like this can have. So I think they talk around something like 1.2 billion now has been generated for the economy, the rural economy over there, because of that investment and support that they had from a Irish government level, and Vodafone, who were the big sort of investors in that network. But they've really demonstrated the importance of having access to space on people's doorsteps, especially for those more remote and rural communities, so that people can stay in the communities that they live in. They don't have to travel into the nearest town or city for work. But also as part of that is having that essential infrastructure. So good internet, which is why Vodafone over there invested, So ironic that Strathdown can't come today because they're having internet problems. I guess that's all really part of it as well. But the bit that I suppose, we're differentiating over here is we're really keen that it remains a kind of community grassroots led organisation and network as well. So that's kind of key to our kind of principles and ethos. So in Ireland, they've got, I think they're over 350 hubs. I know there's a couple of people from Ireland on the call. They might know better than me now. And here in Scotland, since we've launched, we've now got 36 hubs, I think, off the top of my head, with a couple more just waiting to be signed up. And what we are doing as a network is creating space for people to come together. So we're meeting quarterly. We had a meeting yesterday for people just to share and learn from the different hubs in the network. And that's been really helpful. We had a learning exchange, which we had earlier in the year, which was an opportunity for some of the hubs together, again, to share that learning and insight and help shape the network a little bit. And then the other piece that we're working on is how do we actually, I suppose, find investment for the network, but more broadly, how do we make people aware of these amazing spaces across Scotland? 36 is just a tiny percentage of how many spaces are out there that people can access. So when they're traveling or working, that they're using these, community-led spaces as opposed to staying in your hotel room or working from home, because we know that community and that connection is really key for people. But it's the bigger impact that we're seeing is that it's feeding into the local economy, it's creating opportunities for jobs, it's opportunities for community engagement. It links into kind of the wider community wealth building piece, as well as that kind of sustainability and inclusivity. And the hubs that we're working with they really know their communities, and you'll hear that from Hannah shortly. About that kind of knowledge of that community, and then that helps drive the programs and support and the way that they operate and how they kind of generate income, because it varies from hub to hub. I suppose the common feature in the hubs in our network is that they all offer some access to space. Now, co-working in a city like Edinburgh, we've got 400 plus members. So that's going to be our core revenue stream. In Dunoon, I don't think Hannah's got 400 plus members. So she has to get a little bit creative. So they've got a couple of desks, but they've got other things and other ways of generating income. So it's around thinking around how can you kind of build that. And that's what I think is really inspirational actually with some of these hubs, is how they're making use of that space and that asset in different ways. And again, my multitasking, again, I'm jumping ahead because I've already mentioned this. I guess some of the key kind of pieces that are important for us is that the network continues to promote and provide accessible, really high quality, community focused workspaces, but also at the heart of it, that it's fostering that inclusivity, safety, sustainability and resilience in communities. We continue with that independent grassroots level, but really hopefully lean into how we can support local economic development and social regeneration as a network as well. And we think it's really essential for kind of Scotland's wider economic regeneration and advocating really for that grassroots development that's happening in communities, especially for micro enterprises and smaller people or smaller organisations and remote workers. We actually, and I wanted just to touch on this before I hand over to Hannah, we actually recently piloted a programme. We did have some funding through Scottish Government and an ecosystem fund to pilot a 6-month programme called Enterprise in Place. And this was a real opportunity to bring national ecosystem partners together, like Firstport and Elevator, with ourselves, with some 3 of the hubs in our network, to pilot a place-based enterprise support program for underrepresented entrepreneurs. And we'll share the link afterwards in the chat for anyone who's interested in that. But that was really positive in terms of, I guess, the outcomes, 80 plus people in those different communities engaged. But actually what was really important for them was having access to space in their local community with somebody who knew the community, could make the connections locally and nationally, and support people who are looking to create work that works for them in their community in different ways. So some were sort of moving into freelancing, some were thinking about setting up their own businesses, or developing their sort of skills in that space. So I think that's an example how you can use a network of community spaces and hubs to really complement that kind of wider national policy around ecosystem support and enterprise support as well. I think that is all my slides. Oh, one more. If you're interested and have a hub where you think you'd like to offer some more kind of, access to workspace in your community, you can get it listed on the website. It's very simple Google form, so that QR code hopefully will take you to that, and you can do that. But we will also send out the link afterwards, and I've got a couple of pieces of work that we've done around just building the case for the network, which we'll share as well. So that's kind of, I suppose, wanted to give you that big picture around why it came about, why we set it up, and how we're acting as that kind of convener. And then obviously Hannah is going to tell you a bit more from a local level of what that looks like in practice as one of the many hubs in the network. Seamless link, see, Hannah?
Right then, I will try my best to be as here we go. So as Helen said, that so I was actually engaged with Melting Pot many years ago, so back in about 2018, I think, where Melting Pot was actually running training on running co-workspaces, and trying to sort of look at the different aspects of what management of co-workspaces and what inclusion within sort of workspaces actually meant, and that was a really helpful bit of training for me. I'm a sort of designer by training who works a lot within the social enterprise space, and I relocated to Dunoon about 15 years ago with kids and with care responsibilities. And like many women, I think found themselves, my partner had to commute into Glasgow for work, so I found myself a little bit sort of hamstrung for developing a career and keeping a professional income coming in, and also looking after kids and finding a community of work for work as well. So really the work I'm doing now in the pop shop really stems from that challenge that I personally experienced. So I'm going to go down to the next slide. I was lucky enough to get on a master's course at Glasgow School of Arts Innovation School in about 2016, and did research because obviously I'm a designer. I'm in what's called the creative industries, and that in Scotland is 16 sectors of creative work. And what you tend to find in rural areas is that the sectors that are actually considered really for support tend to be the ones that are less technological. You tend to get representation in rural areas of things that have a good interface with tourism, and that affects how creative people are supported in rural communities. And that's certainly something I felt myself. Obviously this stuff changes over years, but certainly within policy and within the way that support mechanisms work for the creative industries, you tend to not get so many designers operating in rural spaces and people with advertising backgrounds. But what I found out through the research that I did through the master's course was very much, so I looked at very much my own community and found representation of all of these sectors and all of these people, but very much those people were hidden. So we're not, as a rural community, we weren't necessarily getting the benefit of having these expertise and skills in the community. So when I looked at this issue, I started to think about co-working, which is when I started looking at how we could then utilise spaces in the community for co-working. But what we really did was actually spoke to a lot of people and picked up on a lot of isolation issues as well. And also one of the critical ones is paid work opportunities. There's a lot of volunteering that goes on in rural communities to keep things going. But part of the challenge there is there's also a working population there that needs work and needs support. And it's how do you get support and how do you develop opportunities for those people? And actually coming together through work can really help that, and coming together through a network. I'm picking up work through knowledge networks and stuff. So at the very least, it's really good to bring people together to help sort of develop those work opportunities for people. Part of the research we looked at, though, was actually that bit around, well, what spaces are here and how can they be used? And one of the things that came through really strongly when I was looking particularly at more remote, not just Dunoon, but more remote places like village halls and places that were run by communities, that although there had been attempts to do co-working in some of the village halls, it didn't always work because it was about some of the attitude and management issues around how you open spaces up. So who the key holders are and how they prioritise those needs of that sort of workforce as well really had a big there's a big challenge there in how do you make those spaces affordable for the working age population when they're not on low incomes, and how can we make those spaces accessible, not just through sort of access issues, physical access issues, but positioning them in our communities so people actually want to visit them who are working. So a lot of stuff about that. So eventually, and it was quite a long road, I ended up running a shop space in Dunoon as a little co-work space, and it's small. We have five desks at the moment. We also have a workshop space at the back, and we also have a garden space. And we charge for desk hire. We've got an anchor tenant, which is Dunoon Community Development Trust, and that bit about work, what that has enabled us to do. So I am contracted by the trust to go out and do work around community engagement and design and in my community, and that gets paid into the pop shop. And we then are able to look at how that money gets used as well as an independent organisation. We've been able to bring in subcontractors for some of that work. We've been able to use our membership and make sure that they have work in their own community, which is really important. Because what we found was, again, these skills are just completely lost, and actually giving visibility to those people who are working and being able to give them on occasion bits of work is really helpful to them from a career perspective, and also just from people who actually really like to work, to do things in their own communities and get a bit of money for it sometimes. So that all really helps. The other thing we've got and developed, again, with members, so a lot of our work is directed by our membership and what the skills they bring. So we've been able to develop a garden at the pop shop as well. And that garden is also linked to another project that we're developing as an income generator to underpin some of the work we're doing. Just move slides. So Helen mentioned as well that through the Connected Hubs network, so again, as an organisation, we've been able to tap into that Connected Hubs network, and we've again been able to sort of bring expertise and opportunities into our community to do enterprise support for local people. And that's been a really helpful thing. It's just like another string to our bow. And the other income generator that we've been developing is a project called Dunoon Goes Pop. That's come very much out of research around heritage in the local area, and how do we get heritage activated in new and interesting ways. And making drinks, because Dunoon has a heritage of drinks making and manufacturing, is one thing that we're doing. So again, through that bit of working with our members and collaborating around stuff, we're now developing products that have an impact on the regeneration of the local area as well. And so our future plans are very much around how to continue to do this work, how to increase our membership, particularly build networks around food and drink. We've got a dandy that sits in the garden, which is a small caravan slash tent that Helen has had the pleasure of sitting in for a meeting, but we haven't actually got a proper meeting room in our space. So that's something we really want to look at this year, to see if we can resolve that. And we're hoping to put in a kitchen there so we can also have that as a hire out to our members as well. And we want to continue to broker collaborations. And I've just, as a joke, put rhubarb there as well, because one of the things we're doing this year, which is part of Dunoon Goes Pop, is hosting our second annual rhubarb festival, using the space, using our membership, but trying to sort of bring new, I suppose, new thinking into how new opportunities to our members around the garden space that we've got. So I hope that gives you a small overview of the stuff that we're up to here in Dunoon, and I'm happy to take any questions, but I'll stop sharing now.
Thanks, Hannah. That was really interesting. I've got a few questions, but I'm going to let others speak first. Just looking at the chat. I think so. Stu McKillop, asked a question about how you sign up. Is that, Sue, do you want to unmute yourself there? Is that in relation to Connected Hub Scotland? You were asking that question, and presumably you mean how you sign up as a hub, or?
Yeah, that's what I was asking for. I'm actually here through Scenic Sandbank, but we also own a pub, which is more than a pub. It's a community hub across the street from the community garden, which is being developed. And we have a cottage beside the pub, which has a meeting space in it. But the cottage, we want to develop into a space for people to be able to use locally. And I just wondered how you signed up. I'm actually, while you were all talking, I clicked onto a link and I've got in to register. But yes, I was just wondering how, we progressed that, because we're just outside Dunoon. So it would be good, it's part of our remit to create somewhere for people to be able to gather or to use it as a workspace or whatever.
I guess there's two things I'll jump in. I mean, if you're just outside Dunoon, you should go and hang out with Hannah for a little bit as well. But the other thing, hopefully you found the link on the website there, Sue. Towards the end where it says contact us on the Connected Hubs website, there's a Google form. Once you fill that in, and I probably should have said that at the moment, the 4 hubs that are involved in setting up and running the network, we're basically doing that in our free spare time, little bits of our work time. So we will follow up then once you've filled in that form and get you registered on the website, and then you'll get invited to the network meetings and start making those connections as well. But it can take a little bit of time. That's my caveat for when it might take a couple of weeks to come back to you.
Right. It's taking us a bit of time to get to where we want to be. I just want to know what we needed to have in space for, in place for the space to be usable.
Yeah. So to me, I do know Sue. So we can maybe have a chat at some point, because we can look at maybe how we can help with that, just as a local stakeholder in the Connected Hubs network.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I'll get in touch. All right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, a few people have sort of touched on that thing about how you get something like this established in a rural area and without kind of, I suppose, very costly investment or lots of pressure on committees. And I mean, is there a sort of fairly low-key way of starting something like this and getting involved with the network? Hannah?
I'll let Hannah go first. Go for it, Hannah.
Thanks. I was going to say, for about 2 or 3 years, we were actually running just co-work meetings, so aimed very much at freelancers. We never, despite I think the high level of need in rural communities for the visibility of working age people in these places, we never were able to access any funding to run that network at a local level, which when you look at now, I suppose how this stuff through reports like the Pathways has become really obvious that we need to be doing these things. It's a bit frustrating that that's never been forthcoming. And we had to stop because it became really challenging to maintain that network to a good standard, to promote it, to run the meetings with no money, basically.
Presumably you need, tables, chairs. I mean,
would the
startup funding involve?
For the co-work network, it was basically we just met in an existing meeting space in a municipal hall, and it was very basically just to get people to come together to have a chat, learn some skills, and that was very useful for those people in terms of generating work. So that's what we noticed about it. But actually buying, sort of just even hiring the hall and getting people to sort of pay into that became a bit of a challenge for us. So, but I think, if you've got an empty hall space and you can just run something that's really light touch, that just is about asking people to come for an hour or two to do some work. I mean, there's all sorts of opportunities. If you've got a heated space that has got chairs and tables, and you can be a bit flexible, then I don't think the barriers are that high, but it is not thinking about how you're going to communicate that, and also like, you know, like what other bits of support can you offer as well? Because I think that's what we found, is that people asked us for support and we didn't have the capacity to give it to people. We were signposting folk to things because we had an interest in doing that. But everything you do in that area, you have to think about, yeah, the capacity you've got.
Capacity, yeah.
I guess
So
just
that's
to, I mean, and I think just to add to what Hannah was saying, that I think it's really important that people often think you have to go out and spend thousands on, you know, really comfy chairs and nice desks, and I think people will come. Actually, it's the other way around. And I think that approach, even here, you know, back in the early days of this space here in Edinburgh, it was very much around the gatherings and getting people together in the space, advertising, you know, pop-up co-working days, or come and just work on this afternoon, you know, thinking about that as getting that community. For me, the community is absolutely key to what is the difference between whether a space works or not, because there's plenty of lovely spaces out there that don't work because there isn't a community and there isn't a sense of having that connection. And I think
establish the need
Hannah,
first.
yeah, so it's the people is the key, and having that, we call, like in the program that we just ran, we had community connectors. Hannah was one of those, and Hannah probably undersells herself, but I'm sure she knows everyone in Dunoon and Argyll and Bute. And actually that knowledge and that local knowing that infrastructure is so helpful then when people are coming in. And so it's just thinking around, who have you got like that that you can utilize, what are the national
You think
networks
of
you can
village
tap
halls
into.
as well, with all the events that they put on. I mean,
Yeah,
by nature, every village hall will have tables and chairs.
yeah,
You could, you
yeah.
know,
And a nice cup of coffee and a biscuit. I
yeah.
mean, Christine's on the call, and I know she went and used one of the spaces up in Stornoway. And again, it was, she said the view was great, but the biscuits were better, you know. And it's like, it's thinking around that, and I guess tapping into some of that support and national support that's already there, but then thinking around what have you got already. It doesn't have to be every day. It could be an afternoon a week initially, and just building it from there.
So that's a really important message, I think, to say that actually, yeah, you should start very low key, light touch, as you say, and then build from there, establish the need first, and then, yeah. So just running through further questions in the chat. Rowan, you asked a question about Outer Hebrides hubs. Do you want to unmute yourself at all? Or Helen, do you want to?
Yeah, I'm just really interested to see that on the map, there was a bit of a gap in Skye, and it looked like there was stuff happening on Lewis and Uist. And so I'm the local development officer for the Uig Community Trust.
Mm-hmm.
But it also happens that I'm a trustee of the community hall. And we definitely we have the space in the hall at the moment, which is somewhat underutilized, and we've been talking about it recently. There is a smaller office space that I think could be very well suited for a hub, and we have the benefit in Uig of having the ferry services that go over to Harris and North Uist. So, as well as locals using that hub, visitors that need somewhere to maybe do a call or do a meeting or print something off or whatever could use that as well. So I'm just really interested to know, like, whatever works further out from us has probably got quite a good chance of working here as well. So being able to connect to those hubs would be super useful, I think.
Yeah, and we can definitely connect you. And I guess the other reason, I mean, we definitely know there's gaps, and I think that comes down to just, you know, how we're trying to build the network at the moment in terms of capacity, but also Polly, that some people will definitely know on the call, Chapman, who works for Impact Hub and the Development Trust Association as well. So she has a remit of part of the Highlands and Islands. So actually some of the hubs have come through that connection, because she talks about it quite a lot when she's out and about, which is how we got the ones on the Harris and Lewis, because they were involved in an earlier network. But love to pick that conversation up, Rowan. And as you say, I think I know where you're based actually, and I think it'd be great to have a space there, because you get a lot of tourism in the summer, well, all year round, isn't it, on Skye now? But you'll probably have a lot of people traveling who would love to sort of have access to a space.
We're also working quite closely with Polly with her DTAS hat on. So if
she's the right person,
if it's easiest to pick it up with her, then we can just do that.
Yeah, perfect.
Awesome. Cheers. Thanks.
Great. And the next question was Becca. Becca, I don't know whether we've sort of previous discussions have sort of addressed yours about sort of setting up workspaces in very rural places. Is there anything you want to add on there?
The only thing I was going to add was my daughter was on holiday in Skye a couple of weeks ago and was looking for somewhere where she had to do some work as an emergency and really struggled. So hopefully that will get set up in Rowan. But no, it's really, we've been looking at it like, oh, we need to buy all these desks. We need to set aside a day. What if no one comes? So the idea of doing a pop-up afternoon or something like that to test the water is really, really helpful. So thank you.
Yeah, I think I was going to say I think just doing it as a sort of, even if you planned 3 or 4 and just built up just from there to test it out like once a month, because that, as Helen said, you know, building your community, I
Yeah.
think that is then manageable, and it's not, and so and then you can use that as a sort of and reflect on what you've learned from that, and I think, because I think you can't underestimate part of the reason co-working works is the management of it.
Mhm.
And the
Yeah.
community, like if you're a big co-work space, you employ people to host. We're not that big, it's me plus a few other people occasionally, but having someone who is there to greet and coordinate and pick up on those conversations, I can't emphasize how important I think that is, especially in rural communities, because basically you are then connecting folk and making them feel welcome. And that issue that I picked up on with the sort of, when we did the research around village halls not always being welcoming to different age groups and stuff,
Yeah.
it's that added value that actually will change and reverse some of those things. So definitely.
We
Yeah.
found it was 2 of the hometown hubs down in the Borders and Mid Steeple Quarter, which is regenerating the high street in sort of Dumfries. They started to co-work in Mid Steeple Quarter, first one in a local village hall, and actually got a couple of people who really bought into that. And then they set up a WhatsApp group, and then they almost generated it themselves once they'd done a couple. And that was the same with hometown hubs. So it's taken off really well in Lauder. That is probably not the right way. Sorry for the non-Scottish person on the call. But they again found, once they'd run a few, the group sort of then managed to say, well, we're going to go in this day and come together. So that really helps. Then there is options as they've grown. They actually got a lot of their furniture through a local business. It was actually refitting their space, so donated. So then you can start to think about other ways of getting the furniture as well, if you get to that point. So it doesn't always have to cost. No.
Brilliant. I think it's a cost, and it's also the fact that the space is multi-purpose. So you know, you can't necessarily have a load of desks. But I feel a lot more reassured after hearing people's experiences. So thank you.
Yeah, and we have a flexible space. Our ground floor space, even here in Edinburgh, is multi-purpose for that reason, that you want to be able to shift things out and do other things with it, use it in different ways. So yeah.
Great. So the next one, Sarah Jones had a question about how you deal with poor internet connection.
Yeah, I mean, we're just at the starting point of this. Fosterway is sort of rural, but what we've found from talking to people here is that one of the biggest issues they've got is the poor connectivity that they've got for the internet. It affects people working from home as well. The village hall tried a couple of sessions at having Workspace, and again, they couldn't. The internet just wasn't there. We don't have fibre, and I just wondered how some of you have dealt with that. I know maybe in some more rural locations you you've now got your fibre, but others haven't. And did you work with partnership with OpenReach or with other providers, or I see Hannah's shaking her head.
Yeah, I mean, we're in a town, so it's not that, but I know from through our membership actually. So one of the people that I initially spoke to about the co-working was based on a Hart farmsteading near Loch Goyle Head. He was very remote and he had satellite, and that was the only way. But now you can circumnavigate those issues. And again, this is about, I suppose, putting money into things that are going to be that are going to make the difference. And actually things like Skynet, which is and other sort of other services, which mean you don't necessarily need to rely on existing digital infrastructure, totally take off that pressure, but do cost. So if you're going to put investment anywhere and you know that's a weakness, that is, and what we found when we were like with the village halls, mind this was 10 years ago, was there was a huge reluctance to pay for those kind of services because it was not seen as a kind of necessary thing that everyone would use. But
Yeah, but
actually,
this is what we found with the two village halls that have got these spaces. They're not willing to put them
yeah,
in. I mean, one doesn't even have an internet access. There's not even Wi-Fi when you have
yeah.
meetings.
Yeah, but it's a cost that actually will pay off
Yeah.
because it makes it creates it. There's so many more things you can now do. It's almost that thing about I suppose internet access almost being like a utility and treating it like that. But that's there that it's the mindset there that I think has got to change for some spaces to ever do these things, because actually it's a total requirement of remote working is that you kind of have to have it, and the expectation is that it is going to be there to make you to make things stack up.
And I guess the other piece of it, isn't it, Hannah, is one of the things that we've talked about at the network level is also there's the importance of retaining that independent grassroots level. But part of the reason for building that network of hubs, as Ireland did, is what they found. Obviously, it was a top-down approach over there, but what they found was then they got that investment because they had this network that meant that infrastructure's then gone in across all their hubs via Vodafone. They actually also at a government level gave out free, a certain amount of hours and passes for people then to access the space in the first couple of years of its launch, which actually massively influenced how that works. But they recognise the importance of actually that joined up network level strategic approach as well, to say we actually do need decent internet in these communities that is accessible so people can stay and work, because they recognise the impact that has on the economic from an economic level for those rural communities. To be able for people to be able to stay and work where they live is really key. So
there's a resilience argument as well. So just recently I've been speaking to a community that is more remote than us, and they've been doing their resilience planning, and actually not having somewhere in the community that and a village hall actually is perfect if you want a resilient sort of community hub. A village hall, I mean, I always think it's really funny how we're all talking about buying community assets, and yet a lot of these places, these really rural, have a brilliant community asset in a village hall, but if it's got internet there, in terms of resilience for emergencies and actually that even selling the internet as a resilience issue, I think is why you'd maybe want to do it a bit, how you could position it if you were struggling with those issues and convincing a committee that you don't need the internet.
So, Roz, did you want to just say anything about, you suggested satellite internet can be a positive in terms? Yeah.
It's essentially just what Hannah has said. We don't have satellite in our village hall in Colin, but in the big storm last January when we were out of power for 5 days, we took our personal Starlink to the hall, and because the hall has a generator, we were able to run it. So of course, comms is a huge problem in rural communities in power outages. So in terms of, as Hannah said, selling it to a reluctant committee, not only is it going to be a benefit in a co-working kind of context, but in terms of your community's resilience, it's really important. But it comes down to funding, and I'm very aware of my personal community. We're lucky enough to have a wind farm. That means that, we have the backup of being able to kind of think about longer, bigger kind of funded projects. Like I'm thinking about our village hall, we could use it as a co-working space. It's not huge, we don't have separate spaces in it, but I love that idea, Hannah, of kind of, running something as a pop-up basis. I don't know what the demand would be in our local community, but until you ask, you don't know. But yeah, that's all really. I was just going to reiterate what Hannah was saying.
Oh, that's really good. I think as well in terms of the money for internet, because if it is a resilience thing, there is other bits of funding you can bring in for that sort of thing, and so I think it's just about being clever with the framing of it sometimes. And yeah, so.
Did anyone else want to make any points on internet connection experiences before we move on?
we've got the internet put into our local hall, and prior to that, we were getting people coming and trying to have whole meetings, like for instance, citizens' advice, Alzheimer's groups, because they didn't have an internet connection. They said no, we can't come back. Now that they've got that, they're more interested in coming back, setting it up, things like that. And the cost of the internet has been paid by the uh, management committee of the hall. A great big asset, plus to all the groups that are using it, the hall as well.
Right, thanks, Tony. Any other points on that one? Good. So Megan from Applecross, can I maybe ask you if you're happy to unmute yourself just to tell us a bit about your recent acquisition?
Hi, thanks. Yeah, I mean, just very quickly, as I said in a comment, we recently bought a Church of Scotland building that we're in the process of converting into a community hub. And one of the things we're struggling with is just finding the right balance between, what fees to charge users, which are going to take account of accessibility and low incomes, but also how we can then cover the overheads and for the facility not to become a drain on the wider development trust. So I'm just interested to know how people have found that balance. Thanks.
Helen, do you want to take that in terms of your...
It's the age-old question of getting your pricing right, isn't it? And we work quite a lot with organisations actually of all different shapes and sizes who are thinking about how they diversify income streams and become more sustainable for our consultancy arm. And it is that challenge of how do you keep costs at the right level to make sure it's affordable and accessible for those within your community of different means, but then also how do you get the pricing right to cover your overheads. And James, who I work with quite a lot, always says just you need to really dig in and know your numbers, and really know your numbers inside out and upside down, and like what are all the unforeseen costs, including that volunteer time, and then you can have different price points. We do it at the Melting Pot, we do it for our consultancy, we have different price points for different people, and actually most people are okay with that. We have a different price point for a big organization versus an individual. I guess we have off-peak prices, we have peak prices. Hannah, I guess, will have something similar with some of the work you do. But we only more or less break even as a social enterprise in the centre of Edinburgh with 400 plus members. So that shows you how hard it is. And we've had to diversify our income streams over the last 3.5 years with that change in landscape. So I think the biggest thing you can do is think around what are all the different creative ways you can generate income, and not be afraid of using the word profit. We don't use it enough in this sector. It's okay to make a profit if it's being reinvested back in to support the community. But I think it's that, there is lots of help out there through sort of Just Enterprise and others with for this year anyway, with the kind of know your numbers pieces. And that's a really good starting point, I think. Christine, probably through Firstport, there's bits and pieces as well if you're starting out. I can see you, so I keep pointing out Firstport, but but yeah, I think that's what we thought about. But actually having lots of multiple income streams, and personally moving away from being reliant on grant funding, because it's not there in the same way, and it's much more competitive. So if you can think around ways to generate income, and Applecross, obviously you do get a lot of tourism. I've been there up over that road and in. So again, how can you, is there something you could do and offer those tourists when they're there in the kind of busier months as well? That's kind of what I'd suggest.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think you've got to look at every square inch of your space. I mean, one of the things actually the training at Melting Pot really opened my eyes to was just the maximisation of space and income through really cleverly thinking about how you design your space, how you design your desks. We've managed to shuggle desks into our space. We are not, we don't rely on desk income, because it's too, for the number of desks we have, which is like 4/5, it's a nice additional income, but our core income is coming through other sort of contract work that we're doing with our members. So the space is almost like it's useful to have it as project space. We've got anchor tenants and it connects us into things. But our income streams are not limited to desk hire, because if they were, we wouldn't, I think we wouldn't survive, because we're too small a space. And also to do desk hire well and to have because a lot of these spaces, they're paying for software to manage those spaces. As soon as you get bigger, we're doing it by bootstrapping bits of existing software and me sort of trying to hold lots of things in my head until they get onto a spreadsheet. So it's not, like it's not necessarily going to be a massive income generator. What it does do, though, as Helen says, is it through having events that in a space that are complementary to your membership and pulling on your membership, that is where the stuff starts to stack up. By being available for visitors and for members of your community. I mean, I charge people the same, but there was one woman who was visiting Dunoon who paid a little bit extra because she was like, I'd pay more, in a city for this. But we charge 15 quid a day, which to some people is not affordable, especially when they can maybe go and sit in the hallway of a library or something, like that. But there has to be a line somewhere, and actually that is a low cost co-work space if you were to look in an urban setting. So that's how I've kind of decided it. But yeah, you have to be creative, basically.
I think the big thing as well, I suppose, just to add, is to actually look at some of these other spaces. There's lots of spaces and hubs and out there, and just steal ideas of what works. But Dundragon, I mean, that's obviously had quite a lot of investment. The Rewilding Centre, but they're one of the hubs, and they've got kind of multiple ways of generating income, but again, really attuned with what they're about as a Rewilding Centre. So I guess it's just trying to think, how do you make it representative of that community you're in and what you're trying to achieve, but yeah, having different price points for different people as well.
Great, thanks. I'm just kind of conscious we've only got sort of 5 minutes left. A few more questions, a bit more of a general one from Clarissa here about how you can look to turn an older, outdated hall into a welcoming community hub, and any sort of funding that might be available for that. Does anyone have any experiences to share of funding they've managed to secure for their hall, for example, sort of renovation projects, or any insights?
If you've got wind farms nearby, they do a lot of funding. Good place to look and get funding.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're lucky enough to live in one of those communities, Dunoon is not actually a recipient of any wind farm money, and that's something that we all, that consistency of income, that those projects are giving rural communities is amazing, and actually investing it into co-working spaces and making halls, is a really sound investment, definitely. I think for people that don't have that investment, I think it is just someone just put awards for all, and certainly if there were small tweaks, if you were going to put, I think awards for all make it, and certainly the lottery are really keen on events at the moment that bring people together. So if you can do pop-up co-working and look at that fund for events that, bring people together, and that's maybe one way of positioning your experiments with that stuff, and to get it funded, because it would, I'm sure that would help with those types of things. But it is tricky with buildings at the moment, I think, getting investment into them to make big changes.
I'd do a shout out. There was a fund I saw recently, I can't remember it, but if I remember it, I'll send it to Nikki to circulate afterwards. But I'd also do a shout out for Jane and Aimee's, if you're members of Social Enterprise Scotland, their funding newsletter that comes out every few months. I always find that really helpful, and has often got funds that wasn't aware of until that lands in your inbox. So that's quite a good one to keep an eye out for if you're members. It's a plug for you, Jane.
And I just ask a follow-up question to that.
Please do.
Because I really understand that, getting the people first interested is a big part, getting them into our community hall. However, I think what we really struggle with is getting them interested. We have Scottish Sculpture Workshop right next to us, and they have been there for 20 years, and they have made themselves quite, well known.
and we work together, but they are quite like everything is new in their building, everything is renovated. And whenever they do something, well, they have kind of word of mouth already, like people talk to each other about this is happening. We don't have that yet. The community doesn't really care what we put on the table. And more importantly, the youth is completely out of the picture in the moment, and we don't really get them interested in us. So how do we maybe promote more, more talk about us?
I think that's a huge question. It's very much, I think, and it's something, I think there's always people that aren't in the room, aren't there? That I'm always conscious that, like, our co-workspace serves people who are engaged enough and are able to be engaged. And I think it sounds like you're starting from rebuilding something maybe. And so I think working with the people that are already sort of utilizing spaces next door to you might be a good place to start and put on a joint event. But if you've got needs in your community, particularly for young people, I think it is literally about saying, well, can we speak, just having small conversations just with one or two to offer up the space maybe for something that they want to do. Is there something they want to do in the space, and building those relationships? But it's slow work and it takes time. I mean, and that's the thing. But that's where I would say you probably need to start. I don't know how helpful that is.
One of the big problems when you're setting up a hub is getting young people involved. Most of the people that are coming into our hub are, not being cheeky, are of my age, elderly. Getting young people involved is you're hitting your head against a brick wall. Plus, because you're starting something new up, the locals that are there are against it. It's trying to get everybody to turn around and say, this is good for us. It's meant for the community. It's not just for the people running the hub.
It's a really good point, Tony. And I think we actually ran a really interesting session back in January all about how to, the barriers and challenges, I suppose, of youth participation, both in terms of how young people are using community spaces, but also kind of involving them actually onto committees. And perhaps Aimee might share the link to the recording of that session, because a few of you might find that interesting when she sends the slides and things after this. But one thing I did want to say, actually, I was at the SCVO Village Halls conference last week, and this topic came up of how to involve young people onto committees. And one suggestion was that you could almost pitch it as a sort of work experience opportunity, especially if you want to go into the community, third sector, community development, actually, becoming a trustee and learning how all of that works could be quite useful. So it might be a slight reframing of the benefits and the value that it can give younger people, might help to get them involved. So I'm aware it's now 1 o'clock. Who have I missed? Have I missed any final questions? Would anyone like to unmute themselves very quickly? Or we can always forward questions on after the session as well.
Sorry, Nikki, I was just going to quickly say, like, the part of the issue I would say for us with the startup funding and community enterprise funding is that it is for new organisations. So it's really difficult for village halls and community spaces to apply to that. But and I know this has happened in some of the Irish examples, is that village halls and community spaces have offered up a space for a potential social enterprise, and because it's a separate entity from the village hall, they just have a rental agreement, then they've been able to use the startup, or could potentially use the startup funding for that. And the other thing I was going to say, I feel like particularly in rural places, is that when that community hub is set up there, it snowballs. I do think, and Helen will have issues in Edinburgh that rural places might not have, and vice versa, because for anybody who's in a rural community, you wear more than one hat, you do more than one thing, you're involved with different things. And what I think some of my favourite examples from the Irish example is that somebody would come and use it as a co-working space, but then they would also have been a yoga teacher 10 years before, and they're like, oh, I could do a yoga class once a week. And that it just increased the hall usage as well. And then one of the things with the super fast internet that they installed in Ireland was that they then spoke to the local high school, and some of the older pupils, senior pupils, came in and studied in that space alongside folk who were working for national institutions and things. So it stopped that depopulation as well. So there's just, like, I could talk at length about this.
Yeah, I mean, we're
But there's a lot of
seeing
good
libraries.
examples.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing libraries disintegrate across this region, or be marginalised, and I think what you don't see in a library is that it's essentially a first port of call for people that are studying alongside working, alongside, you know, people accessing the internet. So, and actually that marginalisation of libraries has really big implications for poverty as well, in terms of just no one being there, you know, to shoulder some of the burden of people, you know, needing internet access to help with relatives, or, you know, who haven't got that at home. It's huge. So it's a massive issue. But I think certainly internet access in village halls can help with some of that stuff. Again, with the right people involved, can really start to look at other opportunities there. But it's getting that the basic infrastructure, I think, is definitely good internet access and welcoming, supportive people involved, for sure.
Great, thanks, Hannah, and thanks, Christine. Some really interesting points there that you made. So I think that's probably it for the session. And huge apologies if I've missed any questions in the chat. Feel free to email Aimee or I, and we'll forward them on. And also, if anyone has any ideas for future sessions, I think it's fair to say, Aimee, we don't have anything in the pipeline yet for the next meetup. So if there are any sort of burning themes or topics you'd like us to cover, then please let us know. But if there's nothing else, if I can just hold. Oh, sorry, Aimee.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I've posted the feedback link in the chat. If everyone can fill that in, that would be fab, just to let us know how these sessions are going. But you can also put you know, ideas for future sessions in there. There is a bit that you can detail that. So if you've got any ideas, you can put them in there.
Please do. Brilliant. So if we have, just hold on to the speakers, and everybody else have a lovely day and rest of week, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.